All right, you guys are live.
Awesome. Thanks, Tristan. All right, Chris. Should we get this party started?
Let's do it, buddy.
All right. So thank you all for joining. It's another edition of Facebook Fridays. Today, I'm so thrilled to have Chris Stewart here. He is the CEO and president of Berkshire Hathaway's Home Services. Been in the real estate business for a long time. Oh, I hear some folks on the call. Oh, do you hear that delay?
No, I don't hear anything.
Oh, good old Wi-Fi in Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But as I was saying, you've been in the real estate industry for a long time. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. It's interesting. You actually started your career at Oracle. So you kind of came in through the tech background and moved into real estate, which is super fascinating. So thank you for being here. Really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the opportunity, buddy. It's good to be reconnected with you.
Yeah. It's been a while, so I'm excited. To catch up. So the first question I have is one around leadership. So you are responsible and lead 50,000 real estate agents, right, globally, which is a massive undertaking. And I'm curious, as a leader, how you've thought about your leadership style in the kind of age of COVID, in the time we're in, right, where it's less easy to see people face to face, and like how do you think about kind of making sure everyone feels connected to the work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, that's been obviously a really different proposition the last 15 months than it had been prior to that. We actually did our annual sales convention, which we do every year in March. And that concluded March of 2020 on March 12th. So wow. we closed the doors and turned out the lights on the convention business. We had about 6,000 people with us in Nashville, March 10th through the 12th last year. And so, obviously coming back a day later, the lockdowns went into effect, basically about that timing anyway. And so, for me, I just really kicked into hyperdrive in terms of creating content, deploying content, creating, multimedia opportunities to engage our network, whether that was our brokers, our sales management and sales leadership level, and obviously the agents directly. And then just, creating a lot of different, whether it was videos that we were pushing out via email and through our internal platforms, or did a lot of Facebook Live functions. We were bringing panels of agents and other thought leaders together to share information and best practices. And, so it's been a very different proposition, obviously, the last 15 months than it was before that. But I love what we've learned in that process. And I absolutely imagine that moving forward, we will forever be in a scenario of doing a blended format of in-person events and virtual events. So I like what we were forced to learn, I guess.
Yeah, and as someone that's connected to you on Facebook, I've seen that show up in my feed, so I've enjoyed that content. So I appreciate that. I'm curious how you've thought about those lessons to apply to individual agents, because individual agents, maybe smaller sphere of influence, but are definitely thought leaders within their community. And have you seen anything interesting from talking to agents within your network of how they've taken advantage of this moment to transition how they've communicated with their customers and prospects?
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting. 4 years ago, I declared on stage at our annual convention that the greatest technology in the real estate industry are the agents. And I did that to honor the role that they play. I also did that so that, for those that assume or maybe are fearful that technology disintermediates them, that they don't think too much about that. In fact, I attribute all of the industry success last year in terms of the performance of the industry and the role that real estate played, and and what was happening, to the agents. And sure, technology played an important role in making it happen, but in the absence of trust between the agents and clients, we wouldn't have been doing video walkthroughs and virtualizing so much of the closing process and people buying properties sight unseen. I attribute that to the agents. So I think it's really important that the agents continue to respect and honor themselves in terms of the importance of that humanity in the transaction. But to your question, I have seen tremendous responsiveness on the part of the agents to be more creative and to be more open to using different elements of technology in all aspects. As an example, a lot of our top producing agents that have never used Zoom before, never used FaceTime in some of the initial consultations, virtualizing the closing process. And that's coming from a lot of, veteran agents that have been in business a long time that have said, man, it just opened up a whole new world for me to build better, more connected relationships with my buyers and sellers. And I think that's been a really, really good thing. And the other thing is, and I always encourage agents to think about, as a business that is providing professional services to consumers, your storefront operates in a number of different formats: social media, email, obviously physical interactions, whether you're networking or meet someone at an event or whatever it might be. You've got a lot of storefronts, so to speak. Yeah. But ultimately, the product that you're delivering is not just the home. It is the lifestyle, it's the community, it's your connectivity to that community. It's what I refer to as your ecosystem. So the trusted network of professional service providers that are adding value to your customers: mortgage, title, escrow, home inspectors, home and warranty, right? All of this needs to be thought through in terms of how you're leveraging technology to convey via content, what those values and what those experiences are. And each agent, I think, has an opportunity to approach that very differently.
No, it's a really good call out, and it's something that at Facebook we think a lot about, and I'm really proud to be part of this company because it really is an and proposition. It's people and technology, and 1 + 1 should equal 3 versus technology, right? And I think what you're talking about with agents is a great example of the entrepreneurial spirit of agents. And the ones that have been successful aren't afraid to rethink how they've done things and aren't afraid to look and say, okay, what's going to make me successful in the next 5 years isn't necessarily the same things that I did the last 5 years, those types of things. And I loved your point around kind of when you say storefronts, as someone who's a marketer, I think about that as a brand, right? So if you drive by, we'll keep it old school for you, and I'm in the Bay Area, so I see them all the time. Intero, right? If you drive by an Intero storefront, and there's one in downtown Menlo Park, right where I live, the way that building looks is part of the Intero's brand. But similarly, if I go to the Intero's website, and that's a good, fast-loading, slick experience, that's also part of the brand. And a lot of what we talk about with our clients is your technology stack, your touch points with consumers. Those are all influencing your brand. But to your point, the way agents make clients feel is the most lasting impact, right? Technology, if done well, especially in the moment we're all in, should make it easier for you to leave more and more clients with a better feeling about kind of that experience, right? And so maybe it's not the one-on-one coffee at Starbucks or the phone call, but it's more scaled approaches. And I know you come from a technology background, and a lot of folks are thinking through how to bring technology to help make agents' lives easier and more effective. And I'm curious, as you think about the next 18 months for you guys, what are the things that you're prioritizing in terms of things you want to bring to market, or experiences or programs to bring that customer experience through agents at scale?
Yeah, I think there's some fundamental realities in the industry that I think we really got to continue to focus on and allow those things to set the priorities in terms of our deliverables and initiatives. And I think one of the most critical things is that, 2/3 of all the deals, right? So 70% of the business in the real estate industry today is still generated by way of a personal relationship between an agent and a consumer, or by way of a referral. So there's still 1 degree of separation, 0 or 1 degrees of separation between the agents and 70% of their income. And the question I always ask is your business development and efforts as an agent or team, is that proportionate to that reality? Unfortunately, I think 60, 70, 80% of a lot of our agents and teams budget, their time, their energy, their focus is spent on the top of the funnel. And if the top of the funnel only generates 20 to 30% of our closed business, why wouldn't we have a proportionate focus and allocation of our time and energy and resources and money? So that's one thing that I feel like we just have to continue to kind of drill into. The next thing is, and I think this is a phenomenon that will continue to erode or dilute the agent's value long term, is when consumers are asked, most consumers say that when they're preparing to make a real estate decision, they first seek the counsel of their friends, their family, their coworkers, their neighbors, maybe their financial planner, before the real estate agent. Now, once they've made that decision, then the real estate agent is obviously front and center, obviously, starting with an online search as well. But I'm saying that's a broken model. The real estate professional cannot stand behind the decision. They need to go ahead of the decision. A real estate professional needs to be as important as an advisory source of information to a consumer ahead of a real estate decision as accountants are in tax preparation, as lawyers are in legal situations. So, but that only comes with agents being more deliberate about how they're positioning themselves, their value, and the value of their ecosystems. And that's something that we collectively as an industry, we need to do a better job of that together. And when I look at the postcards that I get as a consumer, and when they're merchandised with calls to action, is it time to move? Are you ready to buy? Are you ready to sell? See, those are so tactical, and it sort of offers up to the consumer, hey, when you've made your decision, then call us. But until then, we don't bother us, because we're looking to close deals in the next 30, 60, 90 days. But we've got to be more relational and less transactional. And so really everything, Keith, that we're doing from a technical and marketing and positioning and mindset perspective are really helping our agents think more about these fundamental truths of our industry, what the consumers are telling us in their behavior and their survey information, and then trying to marry up our technology and marketing and brand and content to help the agents, make these shifts in how they're operating their businesses.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point. I mean, what you're talking about is moving from being a salesperson to being a consultant, right? And so, and a trusted one, right? And so if an agent is being brought in earlier into the process, similar to like an accountant would be brought in, or a financial planner or whatever, the expectation is that the agent is going to show up and do what's best for the consumer, even if that means they delay selling or buying a house because of realities, right?
Amen. Yeah. And that, so rooted in all of this, right, is this reality that the salesperson comes in as an independent contractor, right? Entrepreneurial mindset. I need to find my next paycheck. That's fine. I get that completely. What I'm saying is at some point, that transactional mindset has to transition into more of a strategic, relational, advisory mindset. That's the reason that you don't see, billboards and so much personal promotion obsession in some of the other similarly situated professional service industries that are focused on consumers. You don't see so much of it, right? And what I'm saying is I don't see that transition happens for enough of our real estate sales professionals. It has to happen. So we've got to help agents create more financial independence, because once you have financial independence in this business, now you don't have to be so emotionally attached to the outcome. And now you can absolutely advise them that it's not the right time to buy. It's not the right time to sell, or whatever the scenario might be. So, that it just comes back to that fiduciary. That fiduciary responsibility on the part of the agents is the most critical thing. And if they don't have the financial independence I believe that creates some
Yeah.
compromise or conflict, and so that's what we're trying to help our agents with. Play the long game.
That's a really good point, because if you, to pay your own mortgage, need to sell a house this month, you're going to be incentivized to focus on either clients that are going to be ready to move this month, or of the people you talk to, people are human. They need to solve for their own self-interest. So that financial independence, how are you thinking about that for the 50,000 agents that you support?
Well, I think the first thing is, and I try and start all of my presentations to our network members with, first of all, an acknowledgement and a celebration of their decision to pursue a career in real estate, because it's a tough career. And virtually all of them have skill sets and experiences, and many of them, this might be a second career. They have other options. So I always applaud and celebrate their career, their career choice here. And the second thing is to recognize that they're the CEOs of their business. And I always try to appeal to them as, I'm the CEO of this business, you're the CEO of your respective business. So let's just talk as peers about some of the observations in the industry and help kind of shape what the future should look like. And I always try to say in that is that if you're the CEO, you're trying to work on and in your business simultaneously. And ultimately, you should be focused on your net income. And what I see a lot of agents do right now is chasing top line growth. Top line could be in the form of gross close commissions. It could be in the form of closing more transactions. But as they're chasing top line income growth or total sales volume growth or total units closed growth, what I hate to see is them chasing expense load at a commensurate scale. In other words, if you're the CEO of any other business, you're going to be chasing top line growth and contraction or compression on your expenses. And so getting them to think about that as a mindset, now then they start to think about, oh, wow, so now I need to be more focused on tracking where my lead sources are performing, tracking my cost per acquisition, understanding if my broker or if my brand are providing different pieces of technology. Do I really need to pay vendors A, B, and C for solutions that I could get for free from my broker or my brand? Just getting them to be more mindful of, wait a minute, I am the CEO, I'm an entrepreneur of a relational practice, not an employee in a transactional business. And that, I think starting with that mindset shift, Keith, sometimes is kind of the first step. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah, and to your point, it bleeds through to their experiences with their consumers. Consumers aren't dumb, and they know if they're working with a CEO or if they're working with a salesperson, right? And I think there's a big difference in how those people show up. And so it goes, I think, beyond what you said about like being really smart about running your business and managing top and bottom line in your P&L, but also then to how you show up as an advocate and a consultant for consumers. So I'm curious. So one of the things that at Facebook we noticed a while ago, and it just launched a program a couple months ago to help solve some of this, is there's a lot of vendors out there that are, you go to any conference and there's all these booths selling tools and technology to agents. A lot of them, with Facebook and, a Facebook logo in there. And so we went through a process to vet a bunch of partners. We're calling it a top provider initiative. So these are partners that we've actually looked under the hood, looked at their technology, looked at the solutions they're recommending to agents, and we've kind of given them our stamp of approval, saying that like, hey, these guys are doing well. And so you have a scaled program through us as well. You guys are part of that, and so thank you for this. I'm curious how you think about helping solve that problem from your side, right? You've got these 50,000 agents that you're looking after. You're providing tools, but then they're also getting constantly pitched CRM solutions, lead qualification solutions, Facebook solutions, whatever it looks like. How do you talk to your agents about from a CEO to a CEO perspective of how to think about what's the technology that they need and what is the technology that maybe they don't need?
Yeah. So, and we have a very similar approach with our preferred alliance partnership. So we've got a network, a portfolio of products and services that we vet and put through. And then within that, there's a portion of those that we're actually deploying, either on our dime or in combination in concert with the brokerage network and providing, either free services or subsidized services to the agents. And obviously driving adoption within all of that is the most critical thing, because you've got a portion of the network that doesn't do enough business that they're really mindful of all of this stuff. They're sort of just reacting, and they respond to the limited amount of deals that they do a year. Then you've got another segment of agents who are really mindful of leveraging what's available to them either at the brand or the network or their company level. And then you've got the top producers, and the top producers, they all sort of have an individual mandate or ambition to be so different than everyone else, and they want to use different products and services so that they don't appear to be the same as their their peers in the same office or in the same network. And so I think, to answer your question though, Keith, is I think that it should all revolve around what are the goals of the individual agent or team relative to how much of their focus and energy and resources is focused at the middle of the funnel versus the top of the funnel. And that's one of those things that in and of itself is not an intuitive conversation for a lot of people. And I'll tell you why. Because a lot of agents and teams still use vocabulary like leads and lead generation and inquiries and past clients. See, anybody that's in my database, Keith, they're a client. They're always a client. They're never a lead. They're always a client. They're never a past client. So the technology, the content, the initiatives that the lift that goes into perpetuating and furthering and deepening my relationship and my value to those people is completely different than appealing to an audience of prospective buyers in one of my feeder markets. Let's say I sell in Northwest Florida and I'm appealing to Nashville and Chicago and Atlanta as my core key markets. It's totally different. But because a lot of agents and teams operate, I'm always reminded of that saying, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yep.
When the hammer is lead generation, leads, I mean, they're referring to an inquiry by an existing client, and they'll call it a past client, right? They're referring to an inquiry by a past client as a lead. See, that's broken. That's a broken mindset. It's a broken methodology. And so, I also like to share some perspectives from other industries like hospitality, travel, retail. These organizations, if you were to sit down with their chief marketing and chief revenue officers and really dissect their organizational and resource strategy, for the most part, those companies are spending 70 to 80% of their budgets, their organizational resource, at retention and loyalty. They want to make sure if their clients desire to retransact, that they absolutely remove all the friction for those clients retransacting with them on their next booking. Now, the challenge in real estate is our average real estate consumer only does this every 10 to 13 years. So the retention of the muscle memory and the commitment to adding value as an agent to stay valuably connected to them for that period of time takes a lot of work. But if you're focused on it, and if you recognize the economic opportunity of doing that or the opportunity cost of not doing that, then the technology and the services and what you need to engineer your schema around is completely different. So I always try and, Keith, start a conversation with, how are you focused? Is it acquisition or loyalty? In other words, top of the funnel or middle of the funnel? And then what are you doing to add value and to really set yourselves apart? And that brings me to my final point on this question is, see, I think there's this obsession with looking different amongst so many agents and teams and needing to be so different, because they don't recognize that if you're spending most of your time in the middle of your funnel, see, if you are my customer, Keith, I don't need to worry about looking different to Keith than 8 other real estate agents that Keith might also be getting emails from or seeing billboards of. Because I'm saying I've got a trusted relationship with Keith. So all I need to do is add value to Keith's family. I need to enrich his homeownership experience. And I need to make sure that Keith knows that I am a valuable resource, whether he has a leaky roof or a crack in the foundation. That's all I got to do. So I don't need to look that much different to Keith than I think that I need to do. And so I think that's where a lot of agents and teams get hung up with this identity, dilemma. Whereas, our obsession with personal promotion, I think, has gone totally overboard. And that's why I think, by the way, that we have a lot of the challenges that we have.
Yeah, it's you're dropping some really, really great knowledge. So I want to dive in here because I think you're hitting on some really interesting points and stuff that we see on our platform, right? So like Facebook is a one microcosm of where people are spending their marketing dollars. And to your point, the vast, 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 let's call it 95+% of all agent dollars on our platform is at that top funnel. It's about leads, right? And if you think about the programs that exist, it is focused mostly on promoting listings with the goal of getting leads, right? And again, not a bad thing. And you want to grow kind of the overall sphere that you're marketing to. But if that's all you're doing on our platform, it's a big miss, right? And one of the things that's great about Facebook is the social connection, is the ability to kind of drive referrals. And to your point, if you are my agent, I had a good experience with you, and then you're a great resource if I have a leaky roof or whatever that comes up. Like next time I sell my house, even if it's 10 years from now, yes, you're going to be my first call, right? So you've already differentiated yourself by the experience you provided for me as a consumer when I bought your house the first time, and the kind of continued piece there. And so I'm curious, when I think of, you mentioned hospitality, right? And so when I think of loyalty there, I think a lot of it, and we're both, before COVID traveled a lot, right? And like a lot of it came down to like loyalty programs, right? So I think of like the Starwood and the Marriotts and like, the SPG points and all that stuff. Obviously that's less applicable for a lot of reasons to agents, right? But like outside of the like being a resource when there's an issue with the house, or you're looking for a recommendation for somebody to come in for home services, what are the other things you're seeing for agents in that mid-funnel piece? So you've already sold someone a house or helped them buy a house. What are those things that you would recommend that they would do over the next several years as you try to kind of continue that relationship, so as they go back into market to sell the house you helped them buy, that you're the top one that they call? What are the things you're seeing that's really successful?
Yeah, so I think we've got a long way to go as an industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to build more loyalty and more structure around that, and make sure that we're putting the agents at the very center and heartbeat of how all that comes together. But that said, I think the very best agents, they do a really good job of merchandising their ecosystem. So, and they're doing that from the perspective of, sharing content, sharing best practices, sharing lessons learned, FAQs. They're doing event marketing where they're bringing some of those key people. Could be home security. It could be various home maintenance. It could be if you're in an area of the country where solar electricity is becoming the rage, and there's a good rebate program. It could be anything what I see is anything that helps add value and enriches the homeownership experience, recognizing that most people, consumers, they don't have time in their day to figure all this out, and they're not looking for it, right? So it's that old thing, they don't know what they don't know. So how do you show up, and how do you think about engaging with them and providing them things that that can save them time, that can save them money, that can increase the value of their home? Right now, in fact, we're rolling out a new certification, residential remodeling specialist, where we're going to arm those agents who desire to go through this this program and receive this certification, with a whole portfolio of products and services designed to add credibility to their approach in helping their existing customers with a whole array of remodeling types of services. That's an enormous as consumer trend that's happening. So I think it's those sorts of things, Keith, really is, and then how I deliver that as an agent is multifaceted. And I always try to encourage agents to think about, there are things that you're doing personally in terms of being out in the community, networking. You're a part of various organizations, so you're visible physically that way. There's things in print, and then there's, what you're doing on search is different than what you're doing on social, is different than what you're doing on email. And not so much different, it's the same elements of outreach, but you've got to recognize the difference in the mediums and in the audiences, and therefore in the call to action. And so we try to do our best, Keith, to be mindful of all of those nuances, and then help our agents, activate accordingly.
Yeah, we did some internal research to your point around kind of the message. The brand should be consistent as an agent, but the message should be tweaked depending on the format you're in, right? And so we did some research. A little less than 50% of all ad performance on our platform is driven by the creative, right? And it makes sense, right? What's the message you're sharing to consumers? That's going to be very different when it comes to a link ad on search, right? Where you don't have the image and things like that. And, one of the things we're really focused on with agents right now is how do you differentiate yourself through creative? Because if I put up 100 real estate ads, it would be hard pressed for any agent to pick out their ad because it all looks the same. It's all basically listing ads, right? We think there's a huge opportunity. And to your point, less around the promotional piece, less around, and we've seen this also through stats, like big agents face on ads don't perform because consumers, if they're smart, don't really care what you look like. They care what you can do for them. And so how do you use this creative format, whether it's video, whether it's other things, to tell your story about why you should be trusted with the most important financial decision that most people make, right? And there's a lot of great content out there that can be done, and there's a lot of agents doing it, but at scale, we're not quite seeing it. So I think that's super interesting how you're trying to kind of help round out agents' skill sets. If we think about technology and some of the disruptive technology, if you look at what some of the larger tech players are doing in the space, if you think Opendoor, if you think Zillow, if you think Realtor.com, some of these folks, a lot of it is around kind of consolidating the overall real estate transaction. So the real estate agent is at the center of that transaction, but it's only a piece of it, right? There's a title piece to it. There's a mortgage piece to it. And so are you guys thinking at all about kind of being a one-stop shop as a brand for a consumer as they make this transaction? And there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of, I think, spins on that approach, but it seems like that's a fairly big trend. And I'm just curious your take on the validity of that trend or how important that is in terms of your priorities.
Yeah, I think it's critical, and it's a key part of our roadmap, across all of the different solutions that we've got in flight. But to your point, there's a lot of nuance in how you make that happen based on, getting technologies to interoperate. You've got different legal entities across all those pieces of the transaction. And, so bringing that to reality is absolutely critical, because ultimately we know that that's what the consumers want. And I think ultimately the winners of this industry in the future are going to be those organizations who unify a consumer experience and then just figure out everything that needs to happen, behind the scenes to deliver that reality to the consumer. So it's absolutely a part of what we're aiming for.
What do you think the big holdup has been there, right? You mentioned a couple of things. There's some of it is around regulatory, some of it's around complexity, right? This is the largest, often most complex transaction people make. But when you think about other industries, that kind of one-stop shop is happening, whether it's shopping or groceries or even like restaurants, right? Like in terms of delivery. And so I'm just curious, what are the big blockers to that really becoming a mainstream thing in real estate?
Well, I think, to date, I think it's been a combination of some parts regulatory, some parts the fact that you've got different entities that are managing, this each of the steps. So ultimately, an organization or these organizations that are aspiring for this outcome, they've got to bring, all of the compliance structures together, and then enable that with the right, technology complements. But then ultimately, Keith, and this is the biggest thing in real estate, it comes down to people. You've got to have great people engaged in working with those consumers at every step of the interaction. So you've got to have great relationships with the agent and the escrow folks and the mortgage folks and the homeowners insurance folks. And you've got to make sure that you're, for what, 60-70% of all sellers, they're also buyers. So you've got some contingent dynamics that are happening there, and you've got other people now involved in the transaction from that standpoint. So that is, I think, the single largest limiting, element of this. as to why we haven't and what would keep us from doing it in the future is the people piece of it. But if you can create great leadership structures, the right compliant incentive structures, and however that happens, and the right people then ultimately doing the deals and exchanging with the handoffs, because you've got one customer and a lot of different processes, and then the technology that complements that. But to me, those would be some of the most fundamental pieces of why it hasn't happened and what will be necessary to make it happen in the future.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point around people, right? And every leader of a brokerage says that they have the best agents, right? And I'm curious how. I would imagine if I asked you that question, you would say that. And I'm curious how you make that a reality, because with 50,000 people that are independent contractors, there's a lot of flexibility in that business model, but there's also a lot of lack of control because they're not employees, and there's only so much, enforcement in terms of behaviors and things like that. And so it's more of an influence game than like, if Mark Zuckerberg tells me to do something, guess what? I'm going to do it. Right. And so how do you think about that? Because that's a big, because I 100% agree. The right people are going to make that dream come a reality, but how do you do that at scale?
Yeah. I mean, it ultimately, it comes down to, the right incentive structures to make this a reality, right? You show me, it's that old saying, you show me how someone's compensated, I'll show you what they do all day. And obviously you've got independent contractors that can and can't participate in different pieces of this whole reality of what we're talking about here. So it comes down to, in this world, carrot and stick, right? But it's all carrot. So you've got to show to the agent, hey, wait a minute, by subscribing to this process and recognizing that I'm contributing these pieces, and I've got these other partners that come in to contribute these pieces and these milestones, that I'm going to actually be more value to my customers, which generates more referrals, happier customers, more transactions. That's the name of the game. And so, doing that in an environment where you've got a lot of different entities, corporate entities, some that are a part of the same family of companies and others that are not, that's another element of the people dynamic. So that's why, it's all relationships, and I think some of these organizations that are trying to, create this end to end, that's where they get hung up. They go, oh, wow, I needed a different mortgage leader, or I needed a different compensation plan for my mortgage loan officers, or I needed a different handshake between my mortgage loan officers and my property and casualty insurance writers. And, oh, wow, I didn't realize that those people needed to be engaged together in weekly or biweekly calls, and I needed to have more accountability between those people. And, oh, by the way, I need to make sure when I'm doing my offsite retreats that these people come together and get to know each other. There's a lot that goes into that. And that'll be what I think it will be the difference between the winners and losers in this regard. The winners will be the people that really understand how to build culture, camaraderie, team environments that are based on us all winning together. And that's a very specialized skill set in my experience.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, switching gears a little bit, you guys are obviously part of a larger organization, Berkshire Hathaway, and kind of unique within the real estate landscape of a large company being part of an even larger company. And so I'm curious, like, what are the benefits? Like, what is that kind of like? Obviously, a guy like Warren Buffett can bring a tremendous amount of business expertise to any organization. And so I'm curious how you leverage being part of this larger organization to move faster or be smarter or be more thoughtful. Like, what does that look like? What are the benefits there?
Yeah, well, obviously just the stability and everything that you get by operating in a organization with such discipline. There's a tremendous amount of rigor and planning and executional premium and on the operations side. And that, for some, maybe in an entrepreneurial world where they're moving a little bit more freewheeling, spending or losing money, however you want to describe it, with a little less discretion, maybe that would say that, that's not a benefit to them, but it's a benefit to us, right? Because we can operate with this certainty and stability that, the decisions that we're making, the rigor that we're putting into our acquisitions, the discipline around our financial planning and what that means for, the employees and the hires and the compensation, everything like that goes into it. You just operate with a whole level, a different level of certainty and rigor that I think is, for me, again, it's a personality thing. I guess, some people would like it. Maybe other people might not. But for me, those are all key takeaways.
Yeah, and economies of scale, right? Like there's lessons to be had. And I think you see this even at the agent level. What it takes to go from 0 to 10 transactions a year is going to be different than what it takes to go from 10 to 50 or 50 to 100. And I think being part of an organization that's done that at such a massive scale in different industries has got to bring different insights and interesting conversations to your leadership team. When we see that with our own acquisitions. I mean, we talk a lot about how successful Instagram was as an acquisition. I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about as much is how much that brand benefited from the expertise that we had within Facebook around how do we scale a platform from millions of users to hundreds of millions of users, and then ultimately building. And there's only a few companies that have had the scale that Facebook had, and so being able to bring that into the small Instagram team that came over, I think really helped. I'm curious, from your perspective, and maybe we talk about Facebook because that's where I come from. But like, as you think about platforms, and sorry if you can hear my kids in the background, that's got home from school, COVID life. If you think about what a platform could like Facebook could be doing more of, or maybe less of for agents, I don't know if anything comes top of mind, but I always like to take these opportunities with executives like yourself to just get feedback, what you're hearing or what you're experiencing personally, so that we can build better products for you guys.
I haven't gotten any, specific feedback around Facebook, or nor did, anything come up to mind anecdotally. I think that what we're challenging ourselves with, one of the initiatives we rolled out earlier this year is a agent performance platform we call the Real Estate IQ system, where the letter I in the acronym stands for influence. And we're trying to get our agents to think about being more influential, more mindful about bringing the totality of their experiences and the value of their ecosystem and what they've done to be presented in a series of content strategies across all platforms that solve the challenge of moving them in the minds of their consumers ahead of the decision, right? So going back to one of the first things. So we think influence is a really key objective for us moving forward. And relative to, obviously, Facebook is a critical element of how they execute on this plan. And what we're trying to be mindful of is, don't assume that because virtually every agent is probably already massively using Facebook, that they really understand the nuance of the differences in their personal pages and their profiles, and do they have the right understanding of the cadence of what type of information and content they should be leveraging, the difference between top of funnel and middle of the funnel executions, and maybe how to think about budgeting, profile optimization. So I would just say, in response to your question, we're trying to be mindful that not to assume that everyone just understands Facebook and how to use it, that we try to not be presumptive and walk the right people through the right series of steps, and that for those people that are really advanced, how do we show them how to level up? And I think that's all about, what is the point of view in how the agents are sharing their stories, their experiences, their lessons learned, the value in their ecosystem. And we're trying to get them to really think about themselves as guides in their storytelling, not heroes. And I'm borrowing from Don Miller's great book, Story Brand, where he says, basically that is, customers want to be the hero in your story. They don't want you to be the hero of the story. And I think that really applies in our industry, because so many agents are telling their story and putting themselves as hero. Their clients are the hero. And let's make sure that they're a guide, right? So the agent should be the Yoda and the customer is the Luke Skywalker. And so I don't know, I know I answered your question in sort of a roundabout way, but also just sharing that as a partner, helping us, deliver on that vision that I just articulated to our agents, helping us create the right case studies, the right training would always be helpful.
Yeah, and it's I think great feedback, and I do think, again, going back to the top provider program that we launched, a lot of it is us fishing where the fish are. And when you think about, for us, growing our advertising business, we're going to build solutions for what agents say they care about. And as we talked about before, it's about leads. I think there's a massive opportunity with partners like yourself to actually shift the conversation. And a bunch of the stats you talked about, around 70% of your business is coming from 10% of where your efforts are from a marketing perspective. And we need to think about how we reframe that. And I do think there's a massive opportunity to leverage platforms like Facebook to do more of that mid-funnel work, which in my mind is not just engaging and keeping top of mind to customers that you've worked with in the past, but leveraging that bank of good experiences, if you've done a good job for those customers, to influence your prospecting, right? I think that happens in the real world, as you mentioned, around referrals. I think there's a big opportunity to take that into digital formats, and Facebook is a great place for that because it's happening organically on our platform all the time. It's just not done in a more structured way. A lot of the efforts are around leads, and that's fine, but I think there's an opportunity to do other things. And so, what you framed up is, and I like the Yoda versus Skywalker. I think that's the right way to think about it. So that's a really good, I think, specific action item for us to take here. Wait, someone just asked a question. And how do you link it all with tried and true partners without taking away a client's choice? Anyway, we can follow up because I didn't have context there. I wanted to end with just a quick lightning round to get your perspective on things, if you're open to it. So let's start with some real estate ones. Mountain or beach? If you're going to buy your home or maybe your second home, are you a mountain guy? Are you a beach guy? Mountain. Are you in the mountains now? I see a very rustic fireplace in the background.
I'm in my place in Lake Tahoe. So I'm at Zephyr Cove. I got Lake Tahoe golf and a chairlift. I was telling Tristan, this is the only wall down here in my office that doesn't have a window. So this is always the preferred angle for the sun is shining. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, and Tahoe real estate is booming right now. All the people in the Bay Area are trying to get out and realizing they can kind of work out there. So
crazy.
Yeah. Okay. A post-COVID, like when things go back to quote unquote normal, what's like the big kind of trip that you're really itching to take if you haven't had one yet?
Oh, wow. Okay. Probably Hawaii. Actually, one of my high school football coaches, who has now become a great friend of mine, Coach Todd Graham, just took the head coaching job over at University of Hawaii. And he just built himself a beautiful place. So he sends me videos all the time. So we're going to get over, take the kids and get over there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my family and I, we're I think, hopefully, knock on wood, going to try to go this summer. But yeah, it's hard to beat Hawaii, especially if you're in California. Pretty quick trip out there. So let's move on to cars. Would you rather have like a Mercedes or a Tesla?
Oh man, I drive a Jeep. I drive a Rubicon.
Oh, okay. So I'm in the wrong department. I maybe it was like the electric Hummer versus your Jeep. Maybe that's where I needed to go with you.
Hey, that Hummer looks pretty good though. I like the look of that thing.
It does look good, and I don't know what the gas mileage is, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. Are you on like Facebook or Instagram if you had to pick one?
Ooh. You know what? I've got Instagram envy, man. I need to be better at IG. I'm so bad. I wish I was better at Instagram. And so I guess I'd have to say I'm a Facebook guy.
Facebook guy. Okay. Would you rather be the center of the country or on one of the coasts? I kind of know based on where you live, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I could see myself on a ranch in Texas.
Yeah, I could see
that's my future for sure.
Although this year has been tough for weather-wise for Texas. I have a bunch of friends who moved down there, and it's been tough with the power outage and everything else. But it's great place.
I grew up in Dallas, so I'm.
Oh, so you're a home for you then.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any like parting words? I mean, we've got a lot of agents on this call, some that work with your network, some that don't. Anything else kind of parting wisdoms you want to share on a Friday afternoon?
I just so celebrate and appreciate all of them and what they do and the sacrifices that they and their families make to be, to provide this level of professionalism and service. I think they're sometimes undervalued and underappreciated. And so I'm trying to do everything I can do personally, whether they're a part of our network or not, to bring massive, massive value and expand that value in the eyes of the consumers. And I think it's deserved. And I'm really excited about the future and what that holds for all of us.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for your partnership. Really appreciate it. I took a bunch of notes. I'm sure a bunch of other people on the call were as well. It's always valuable to get your perspective as a leader of such a large and important organization. So thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be talking soon.
Okay. Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.